Welcome back. I'm Buntle, ex-McKinsey, ex-Deutsche Bank, ex-Virgin Media, the author of The EHD Boss and Beyond Buy-in. If you're new here, I help nonprofits design and deliver strategies with measurable impact that beneficiaries want, donors will fund, and staff celebrate. I do this with a series of facilitator workshops to refine what you have, stress test your plans, innovate frugally, and set you up to deliver value and ROI that you can evidence. Today, I'm talking about my process for facilitating these workshops. I call it the mission to decision sprint. Mission to decision, implying that you will always leave with a set of decisions that you can then make into a strategy. And sprint, implying that it's going to be quite fast, because I don't believe that a drawn out 9-month, 1-year strategy planning session is what any organization needs. Strategy development is such a labor intensive, time intensive activity to do that you do have to figure out how you're going to compress it and get as much from it as fast as possible. That doesn't mean rushing through things, but it does mean being fairly ruthless about how you prioritize, how you make decisions, and how you commit to what you're doing going forward. Now, in my mind, a strategy is a set of difficult to reverse decisions that organizations make about an uncertain future. It is not just the plan, as in how will we do this. It's also about what you're going to do. It's also about why you do what you do. And importantly, it has to prove that there's a link between what you're doing and the impact that you're trying to achieve in the world. When I think about a strategy on a page and the thing which I want organizations to leave with, I always talk about a strategy on the page for two reasons. One, if it's not on a slide, it doesn't exist. Two, if you can't explain your strategy on one page, it's not clear enough. It's not the sort of thing that your staff will be able to understand without you voicing over. It's not the sort of thing you can send to potential donors and funders without being in a room to pitch them on it. And that really limits your ability to get your message out there and your ability to show people what you're trying to do without physically having to be present. On that one page, I think of it as a house almost. I call it my 6M house. Right at the top is the mission. What's your big ambition? What are you trying to do? Why do you exist? Underneath that, you will have some form of mandate. So what do you do? Where do you do it? Who do you do it with? That topic of your scope is often something where charities in particular really struggle because there's so much impact they want to have and so much good they want to do. And often that means prioritizing in a way that is really uncomfortable from the perspective of geography or beneficiary groups, segmentation, etc. Underneath that, there is something about momentum and how you build a momentum. That's who are the people, the organizations, the partners that you're going to require to move forward with the strategy. How will you engage them? What will the momentum that you build together look like? Underlying that is your method. So how will you work together? This is, in one hand, ways of working around collaboration, decision-making, prioritization, how you will listen to each other effectively, how you will challenge each other without getting defensive. But it also relates to some of your culture, some of the ways that you build trust on your team, your values, as well as the methodologies that you're using as an organization. What you have to believe about yourselves and your work and how that informs your behaviors is mindset. And I think that's especially important for your leadership team to figure out what's the mindset that they want to role model for the rest of the organization, because that's going to set the tone for how your strategy lands, not just with your internal staff, but also with all your other stakeholders, beneficiaries, donors, partners, etc. And then lastly, there needs to be something about mobilization. I think that the best strategy without the capacity to deliver and the capabilities to deliver will not work. We can exercise magical thinking if we would like and plan for a future where we have a lot more funding, a lot more people, a lot more capabilities. But what is more sensible for most organizations is to start with a very stark and very honest view of where they are and think about how those capabilities and that capacity will activate, accelerate, and sustain their mission. If it will not, then you have a very clear opening to think about how you're going to build the plan in order to get to that outcome. And that's why it's important to upfront be able to name that, because you're going to require some sacrifices and some prioritization to get to the capacity and capabilities that you need. In the course of trying to build this house, I think that there are 12 questions that I would recommend everyone ask themselves about their strategy and what they want to achieve. So the first, why do we exist? The second, who are our beneficiaries? And by beneficiaries, I mean, who are the entities that you are trying to benefit with what you do? Who do you do this for? Third, why do others fund us? And those others could be institutions, it could be trusts, it could be individuals, community groups, but why are they giving you money? Fourth is, what are our products and services? Often nonprofits do not think about what they deliver as a product and service, but ultimately it's either something that is finite, a package, an offering that they're giving to people, or it is over time continued touch points with them where you are providing them with certain things. So while it sounds very corporate and commercial to talk about products, maybe not so much services, depending on what kind of nonprofit you are, but I believe that's a very good way to put it because it makes it super clear what the finite scope of what you're trying to deliver is. Next, we have how are we organized, and that speaks to your organizational structure and how you think about not just spans and layers, but really how different parts of the organization should work together to prevent silos, because sometimes the organizational structure that you have is in fact creating silos for the people who work in it simply by virtue of how it's structured. So while that's a thorny topic and certainly something I suggest that people do after they've answered a good chunk of these, it is quite fundamental. What culture do we need? Often people mistake culture for ways of working. And so they're talking about being more collaborative or being more challenging. That for me is a separate question that you need to ask about how you will work together. What culture do we need is much more around if there is a set of behaviors and a set of outcomes you want. Are you trying to be the kind of organization that wins together a family? Are you trying to be the kind of organization that needs to innovate, be bold and challenge, almost like a startup? Are you the kind of organization where hierarchy, process, doing things the right way, best practice is a must have for you, like a process organization? Or are you the kind of organization that's trying to get as much reach and relevance as you can, and you're going to win by being the best in your set of peers, right? Those understandings of what cultural orientation that you have and the decisions you make about that really impact everything, because it's very difficult, for example, in a family-led culture to have performance management and very strict prioritization because no one wants to hurt each other's feelings. Similarly, it's really hard to talk to people about innovating or taking initiative or taking ownership in a process culture where what they're supposed to be doing is following best practice and following the rules, not necessarily thinking for themselves. So, of course, every organization is a mix of those things, but picking one of those quadrants that you want to prioritize and where you want to put your efforts into building that culture, I always find is imperative to organizations. And I write a lot more about that in my book, Beyond Buy-in. How do we know we've delivered is another important question that I think people should ask ahead of time. This is delivered the impact we wanted to, but it's also how we know we've delivered the strategy that we wanted to, right? And for me, that can be articulated in the form of OKRs, outcomes and key results, or simply with something as easy as a definition of done. How, if your strategy is a cake, how do you know when the cake is baked? It's not about the recipe. It's not about the flavor of it. It is an understanding of when you've done enough and it's ready for someone to approve and deliver. Obviously, how you stay financially sustainable is incredibly important to any nonprofit, especially in the global economy we're in now. And that might involve some business model innovation or thinking about your business model in a different way. How do we support teams is the ninth question that I suggest people ask. That is about your people. I talk about how do we support teams instead of individuals, because I believe that strategies are ultimately delivered together. It's very rare that individual contributors alone are going to be the torchbearers for your strategy. It usually is going to be teams at every level of your organization. What partners do we need is also an interesting one that I suggest people ask, simply because we often get caught up in this world of wanting to do the best we can for our beneficiaries, of wanting to deliver as much as we can for our beneficiaries, and assuming that means we have to do everything ourselves or we have to do everything alone. Trying to figure out whether you can have partners and the extent to which you are going to have a partnership. So there's a partnership of you mention them on your website and occasionally shout them out on LinkedIn. And then there's a partnership of shared costs and shared value and shared work for everything you're delivering, right? It's definitely a spectrum, but figuring out which of your peers or which organizations in completely different areas are going to help you support what you do is pretty important. Then you get on to the last of these, which is how will we use digital and data? Once you have worked out that ways of working question, how will we work together, which technically is question 11, it will become very clear to you what you need to make that happen. Sometimes the capacity and capabilities you need are not a factor of the individuals you have in the organization, but simply the nature of your work, how it's structured, how processes work, what tools they need, what information people need. And that can become a very big bottleneck for organizations, especially when digital in their minds only means IT systems, the CRM, the ERP, whatever it might be. And data only refers to impact metrics, right? That is something that organizations need to be very careful about how they think about, because it's so easy to chase sexy projects rather than ones that will directly deliver impact, which is why I suggest that organizations ask this question in a round. So it's not a question that is asked in isolation. A digital transformation or digital strategy is not something that's done on the side. It goes along with your mission, thinking about your beneficiaries and their voice, how you're going to get funding, your delivery structures, your org structure, your culture, your OKRs, your business model, your people, your partners, your way of work. All of those things have to function together for you to get to an answer that makes sense for your organization. And that is both the end product in terms of a strategy on the page, plus the questions that I believe people need to ask in the course of building that. And that is the conceptual overview of my mission to decision sprint. In my next video, I will take you through much more of the actual workshops and what to expect in them. See you then.